Now let's take a look at setting up a multi-resolution sculpt. So up to this point, we've just kind of been using a smoothed grid to work from. But let's say we want to start to create a more complex model or a character. So we're going to learn to set up a multi-resolution kind of sculpt. So what that means is, and we'll take a look at this in detail, but it means that you're going to have a bunch of different resolutions where you've got a low-res base, you subdivide it, can change the shape of that, subdivide it again, change the shape of that until you get up into millions of polygons. So let's start with just the basic cube, but this is 05 begin in your project file. So if you want to go ahead and open that up, it has a cube, but it also has another object that we're going to be looking at here in a second. So in order to take this cube and set it up as a multi-resolution sculpt, what we can do is select the cube, and we're going to come over here and add a modifier. So if we were to add just a subdivision surface modifier, that would add the polygons that we need to begin to sculpt. But what we want to do is have all those levels set up for us to go back and forth. So we're going to use the multi-resolution modifier. Now there's two different types of modification. We're going to use the Catmull-Clark. It's going to enable us to add the polygons and also to smooth the surface out as we go. So you'll see underneath that there is a preview, sculpt, and render, and these numbers next to those correspond to the subdivision level. So think of level 0 as your base geometry. So no more polygons have been added, the shape hasn't been changed at all. So when we add our multi-res modifier to our object, the first thing that we'll do is go ahead and subdivide. So that adds a new subdivision, and we're in sculpt mode right now. If we were to go back to object mode, you can see we're not seeing that division, so all we'd have to do is under preview, change that. Okay, that just shows you, you can see this is the level we'll be looking at in our preview. If we're in sculpt mode, this is the level we're going to be looking at, and then if we render it, this is the level. So we can control those all separately. So now at this point, what we can do is start changing the shape of this, because now we have all these new polygons. If we want to get it even smoother, subdivide it again, and you can see the sculpt number increases. And when we're subdividing, we're taking each quad and subdividing that into 4 more quads. So if you take a look at these 4, we subdivide again, you can see those have been all divided into 4, and also the shape has been smoothed. Okay, so we're starting to get a little bit more, and you can see the level here we're at. Let's subdivide it a few more times. And now we can start to get something that's a little bit more high resolution. Okay, now we can at any time go up and down these subdivision levels by coming in here and changing this. We can also just dial through this, and so we can change the shape at any of these levels. We can also use some hotkeys here. So if we page up, we can go up to the upper subdivision levels. Page down, we can go to the lower subdivision levels. Okay. So once you start getting into the upper subdivision levels, it becomes very smooth, and you can start to add your detail, smooth it out, just as we talked about before. Okay, if we turn off the visibility of this, you can see it goes back to our basic shape, so it just works like any other modifier. Now, if we were to bake this down, it's actually going to bake the geometry into this. But if I go to object mode, you can see we're actually only looking at level 1 here. So if I want to see this in the object preview, I can increase that amount. Okay, if I want to apply this, you can hit apply. That modifier goes away. I can still go in and sculpt. Okay, but I don't have the ability to go up and down the subdivision levels. This is the base that we're left with, so we don't have that lower res base to work from. Okay, let's go ahead and delete this, and we'll take a look at the little project that we're going to be working on. So I wanted something that's will give us the opportunity to do a little bit of detailing, but something that's not too complicated, and something that has a little bit of leeway. So I was looking around for different kinds of sort of animals, and I came across this Indian purple frog, which is a really interesting animal. And I've just read a little bit about it. I haven't never seen one in real life. Maybe some of you guys have. It sounds like they only come out of the ground maybe every so often, but it's got this sort of frog type of a body, but then it has this really small kind of head and this almost like mole kind of snout to it. So really unusual animal, but it's something that we can sort of use to kind of go through the sculpting process. So now I'm going to be using something like this, but feel free to use whatever it is that you want. The base geometry that I have for us is going to sort of lend itself to something like this. And so if you want to do something else, feel free to use your own geometry. So I'm going to bring this in, and you can see I haven't really shaped it too much, but it's just a very basic polygon object here that I made in Blender with just a little bit of extrusion going on the sides for the feet. And then I've just pulled the arms sort of straight out. Okay, I haven't really added a lot of detail for those. I didn't add any detail for the head, just kind of pulled out a little bit of geometry. So we can start with a very rough base shape. And let's set this up for a multi-resolution sculpting process. So just like we did with the cube, we'll take our frog, add a modifier, and let's add multi-res. Okay. Now at this point, we don't necessarily have to start subdividing it yet. We can, but the initial shaping that we want to do is going to happen at the lower levels. And so we would definitely want to come back in here in sculpt mode at the lower levels and begin to shape this. You can see the arms, we don't want the arms to be pointing straight out, things like that. So we can definitely shape that before we get to the higher subdivision levels. Okay, so if you want to delete levels that you've already created, you can delete higher, and that'll delete all the upper levels. So let's go ahead and in the next lesson start to look at some of the other sculpt brushes that we haven't used yet and start shaping our model. So we'll go ahead and do that next.